Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Lake George Historical Association. My name is Ellen, and I am the secretary on the Board of Trustees of our association. We are welcoming Dr. Green, a civil rights activist, and in 1985 she founded the Center for Law and Justice. She is also the executive director of this organization, and it's located in Albany, New York. Dr. Green grew up in Witherby in Essex County in New York State's Adirondacks, and today she'll be speaking with us about that experience growing up Black in the Adirondacks. Thank you, and please enjoy.
Okay, well, thank you for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you, Doctor.
I am going to talk about this book because it contains so many of my reflections about growing up in the Adirondacks as a Black person. But before that, I want to give you just a little bit of a background in terms of where I came from, because where I came from, of course, is very important to me, and it certainly affected my whole perspective on life and what I actually do now. My great-grandmother was born enslaved. And I think a lot of people think that slavery was way back when. I mean, it's been a long time, but the important thing is that the effects of enslavement are still here. And so I want people to understand that it didn't just happen, and as we talked about, like on Juneteenth, that in 1865 slavery ended, because it really didn't. That experience of having my great-grandmother, who lived to be very old, thank goodness, and as a toddler, I remember her cuddling me in her arms. And this is a woman who was born enslaved. She also raised my mother. She was my mother's grandmother, obviously, and she raised my mother. So she taught my mother everything that she knew about life, and it got handed down to me. So that's why I say, you can't think of this period just ending in 1865, because it really didn't. And that's another issue that I'm going to be talking a lot about in the days to come. My family also included my grandmother, who was actually a sharecropper. So enslavement might have ended in 1865, but a new form of enslavement followed that, and one of it was sharecropping, and because the conditions were much worse, actually, than enslavement. So I got to know her a little bit, and I'm very proud of who she was. We recently named the Cultural Center in Albany the Alice Moore Black Arts and Cultural Center because of her. So anyways, they lived in the South. I think both of them were actually born in South Carolina, and my great-grandmother eventually moved to Georgia. But my father, whose mother was a sharecropper, actually lived with her in Greenville, South Carolina. And it was during a period of time when there were a whole bunch of things going on that followed from slavery. Convict leasing was one of them. It was a system whereby the government and other businesses were able to steal the labor of both men and women. For instance, if you were arrested or if you were out and had no job, you might be arrested, for loitering or whatever it happened to be. And so, since you couldn't pay for your fine, you were actually jailed and leased out to businesses and to the government. So they made money off you. So that's another form of enslavement. So we haven't gotten away from it. But anyway, it was a terrible time. And he grew up during that period and also Jim Crow era. He decided to come north because in Essex County, there was an iron ore mining business. And at a particular time that he came, there had been a strike, and there were a lot of the people who had immigrated here from mostly Europe and Canada, by the way. The immigration rates were decreased during the period of the war. And so the Republic Steel Corporation went south looking for particularly blacks who would come north and work, because they had these hot air furnaces that were very difficult. And so anyways, they did go south, and my uncle started first. He came north and working in the mines. And my grandmother, the sharecropper, was very concerned about her younger son, my father, because he tended to get into some difficulties with police. And she feared that he would become part of the convict leasing system. And so when my father got the opportunity to join his older brother up in the iron ore mines, she was very happy for him to go. However, when he got north, things weren't as easy as he probably thought they would be. And at one point, he decided that he would go back south, that he missed his mother and other members of the family. So he went back south and did start a family. And again, my grandmother feared that he was still going to be caught up in the convict leasing system, and now he has the beginning of family. So he decided, along with her, that he would go back north and work in the iron ore mines, which was Lion Mountain at that time. And so he did that. So by the 50s, he had his family, and which included me, and he worked in the iron ore mines in Witherby and Mineville. And that's how we sort of got north. Witherby is an interesting place because it's basically white. There were no people of color in Witherby except one other family, the three members of one of the families. And all the people who came there or who lived there were basically from Europe. And so one of my friends told me not too long ago, when I was asking him about going up there, he said, "We're a very diverse community." And he's right. It was very diverse. It had so many different ethnic groups in the town of Witherby. They were from France and Italy and Poland and all of those places. But he said, when someone came in the community who was different, particularly someone of different color, we thought of them as outsiders. And that's how I got the title to this book, Outsider, because I grew up in Witherby feeling that I was an outsider. It was very difficult to feel a real part of that community because we were not white. And the other thing is, we were not Catholic. It was a very Catholic town. And the priest basically ruled the town. But it did have, I think, a fairly decent educational system. The teachers were great. And, it was difficult to make friends. But we were able to do it. In my family, there were 3 boys and 3 girls. And so we sort of clung to each other because we were considered outsiders. And social life was very, very difficult as you got older because there was a very clear rule in the town, and that was you do not associate socially, and particularly do not have any kind of intimate relationship with someone of a different color. So we were basically left out of everything. The school, we were able to exist in the school because the teachers, as I said, were fairly decent, even though they knew nothing about black people. So they couldn't tell me anything about who I was as an African American because they didn't know, and nobody knew. My parents didn't want to talk about it because they had come from Jim Crow South, and they were trying to protect their children from the horrible things that they had experienced in the South. So it was very difficult to learn anything, especially about the history of African Americans in this country, and of course, up in Riverby, was non-existent. There's now an effort to at least teach people a little bit about, I don't know if you've probably heard about Timbuktu, which was a community. It wasn't exactly a community, but it was planned to be a community that would attract blacks to the Adirondacks. And they were given land by Garrett Smith so that they would be eligible to vote. They had to have at least $250 worth of property for men to vote. Women didn't vote, obviously, and black men couldn't vote unless they had $250 worth of property. So I didn't know any of that. I thought my family was basically the first, along with the other family, were the first African Americans to live in the area, and just didn't know any better. Didn't know that somebody else came there before us. But anyways, we were able to cling to each other in my family and be very supportive. That was the positive thing that happened from this bad experience, is that it made us a very strong family because we saw ourselves as us against them. Some people were nice. One of a group of people that probably were helpful and supportive to us was the Presbyterian Church. We weren't Presbyterian. My mother was Methodist. My father didn't go to church, but that was the only Protestant church that there was. And so that family of Presbyterians were very, very supportive. So that was the negative part. But everything else in the community basically told you that you were different and you were inferior. As I said, in school, you didn't know anything about anybody who had achieved anything and was black. And they just didn't have it. And we spent a lot of time going to, the only thing we did socially, my mother loves to go to the movies. So we spent time going to the movies in the Deer Valley town of Fort Henry. So every Saturday she would gather the children and we'd go to the movies. And the things that were on that screen told me very specifically that I was inferior. They had, a lot of movies about Tarzan and his relationship with Africans. Black people were either portrayed as maids or stupid, ignorant people, So it got to you after a while that something must be wrong with you. So, as I said, social life was difficult, but while you're in the school, it's okay. But once you get outside the schoolhouse door, you learn very quickly that everybody there thought about you in a very different kind of way. So we had to deal with that all of our lives. So what I did with this book is talk about that community. And I wanted people to understand, because we hear some things about white supremacy, and we sort of think of it as being these people who have hoods and, do all kinds of violent things to other people. So for me, that was not true. For me, white supremacy was people who were white promoting the idea that they were superior to me. And they did a really good job because I left Liberty believing that I was inferior. And that's the danger of white supremacy. It's subtle. You don't realize it's happening. But those who are victims understand it, but they are also socialized to believe in their own inferiority. And so it's taken me a long time to get away from that notion. So I wanted to read a short chapter from the book, because I think it will give you a pretty good idea of what white supremacy looks like. And also it happened, this particular story happened in a community that was a resort community. And it had something to say about the resort communities, not only in this particular story, but the other places that were around, including Lake George. Okay? So let me, I hope I haven't written. Actually, everybody always asks me to read this, so that's why I read it. Because it's very clear. It was the dawn of the 1960s civil rights movement. My family had moved to Witherby, a small Marine Corps mining hamlet nestled in the Adirondack Mountains, where a few blacks resided. The few who were there were beckoned from the South to work in the dangerous mines, along with mostly first and second generation European immigrants. These blacks also came to escape Jim Crow oppression and find a land free from racism. We soon learned our new home was no panacea, but displays of racism were more subtle. At the age of 15, I had a brutal and abrupt awakening to the evils of racism and white supremacy that would shape my view of the world and the work I would devote my life to doing. Strong friendships were hard to come by in Witherby, but I was fortunate to live next door to white twin girls who were my age and became like sisters to me. We were inseparable. Now that we were of working age, one of the twins, Myrtle, and I decided to seek employment in the tourism business to earn money for needed school clothing and supplies. We knew how to clean, wash dishes, and make beds, just the kinds of skills needed for a chambermaid position. We landed a position at Claudis's Motel and Restaurant in Paradox Lake, not far from here. And it was also near Spoon Lake, but it was 40 miles from our homes. The job offered free food and housing, so we accepted the maid positions and looked excitedly towards working and living together as roommates. We arrived at our work location where the white Southern owner, Mrs. Claudis, greeted us. During the summer tourism season, she and her family resided in the main house on the property in a large, well-furnished second-floor apartment, which was part of the introductory tour she gave to her new employees. Myrtle and I thought we had struck a nerve. This was almost too good to be true. And as I was walking into the building, I noticed that there were a couple of white waitresses who were sitting out in front, relaxing between shifts or something. And Mrs. Claudis saw me looking at them, and she said to me, "You may never be seen in the front of this building," which I wasn't quite sure at that time what it meant. But following the tour, we met her regular summer help, who she brought with her from the South, a married black couple who cooked for the restaurant. They were assisted by a young, well-built black male teenager. We also met the bartender and waitress staff, who were all white. They lived together in a nice little staff cottage. The time came for Mrs. Claudis to show us to our room. Myrtle and I could hardly contain our excitement about living together during our first day away from home. Mrs. Claudius showed Myrtle to her room, located in the family's luscious living quarters. We then explained again how we expected to live in a shared room. Mrs. Claudius quickly told us that that was impossible. Then she led me to my room, which meant that we walked outside the building to the back of the building. And there was a large barn with steps leading up to its unfinished loft, a space with high-pitched ceiling and no furnishings except for a cot. Mrs. Claudius explained that a section of the loft would be my room. The other black staff worked a night shift. They were housed in the barn as well. I stared in disbelief and fear. Because I was black, I had to live in a barn, while my best friend, who was white, would live with the owner's family in the large, furnished room in the big white house. I became numb with anxiety and anger. Myrtle seemed dumbfounded as well and begged to room with me. Mrs. Claudius reiterated that our request was out of the question. I was being told I had to live like the animals who once occupied the space now reserved for me and the other black staff, and I asked myself, what should I do? I kept asking myself, knowing my mother desperately wanted me to work for the summer to help her get the things that my siblings and I would need for the coming school year. I did not want to disappoint her and add to the stress my family was undergoing due to our poverty. And it was a terrible situation for us. But added to these concerns was the fact that I had no way to get home short of walking 40 miles. I waited until the black night staff came on duty to ask them how they felt being housed in a barn and segregated from the rest of the staff. Seemingly bewildered by my question, they simply dismissed me by replying, well, this is just the way it is. Fearing a night alone in the big barn and confused about what to do about the situation, I slowly made my way up the stairs as night was falling. A single cot awaited my anxiety-ridden body, and reluctantly I crawled into it. Unable to sleep, I noticed something perched on a high beam above my bed. What was it? Soon others joined it. Another, although fearful of them, I had never seen live ones in my life. They were bats. Bats were circling the room. I sat in that room and cried until dawn. I had my answer about what to do. I marched down to the big house at daybreak and asked to see Mrs. Claudius, and I relayed how angry I was over her display of racism. After I finished my loud, angry ranting, she told me with a flushed face that I was fired. My response to her was, surprisingly to me even, I said, too late, I already quit. Myrtle had joined us in the room, and she chimed in that she was quitting too. So we gathered our belongings and headed for the highway to go home. That day, I took along my dignity, self-respect, and commitment to fight racism and white supremacy. My promise to myself at 15 years of age was to never again allow white people to demean, disrespect, or devalue me or other blacks, particularly those in poverty and under the control of our legal and criminal justice system. So after all, my dad left the South primarily due to his fear of convict leasing and chain gangs that were so much a part of the criminal justice system. And also at this time, I realized that day that assigning me to live in the barn, Mrs. Plautus was acting to dehumanize me and treat me as my great-grandmother had been treated because she was property. So that's the story about, as I said, the discrimination that occurred in the resort community of Paradox. Later, my brothers, later, I tried to get a job in Lake George with the other twin. We were driven down by her aunt, and we went everywhere looking for a job. We got back home, and I think maybe a couple of days later, my friend got a call that she could work in Lake George. I forgot which one of these resort places it was. But she got a job and I didn't. And we both went to the same places and had, the same, skills. I probably had a little bit more than she did because my mother had worked as a maid before and it taught me how to do certain things. Then later, my brothers, I think it was my oldest brother first, he was able to get a job at the Sagamore Hotel. And, he had expectations, that he would work here and it was a lively, community after work. There were a lot of college students who were here working and enjoying, the nightlife and socializing as young people. The Sagamore Hotel told my brother that they would hire him to do some kind of labor work. I wasn't sure what it was, but that he could not stay with the white students. He was told that he had to stay in some little shack in the back, but he could not stay with all the other college students. Then my second brother, my younger brother, came to Lake George to do the same thing, to work. He was able to get a job. I don't know why he did it, but he was able to get a job at Sagamore Hotel. We were desperate because we were poor. So, that's very safe. And he was much more outgoing. He was, more of a college, type, than my other brother. And very sociable. He's an excellent athlete. Just adorable. He had the same experience. He was told that he could not stay with the other, students. And they put him in some little shack, on his own. So, which was, tore him apart because he had already experienced at school. He was, as I said, he's a great athlete. He was very, good at what he did, and just an enjoyable, gorgeous, young man. As a matter of fact, he was, voted king of the, junior prom. That's how popular he was. Unfortunately, he could not get a date to go to the prom with. And he never forgot that. Never forgot that. And, so those are the kinds of experiences that stay with you. And so I talk a lot in this book about those experiences, the employment stuff, the discrimination, the stereotypes, the stereotype of African Americans being ignorant and kind of stupid. They were there. And people were surprised when, I remember one teacher who was in the study hall, I asked to go to the bathroom, and she said, well, did you pass your social studies test? I said, of course. So, okay, then you can go to the bathroom. But what I did was take that stereotype and turn it upside down. So I ended up being a pretty good student. As a matter of fact, I graduated ahead of my class. And not only did I enjoy school, but I had to prove something. I had to prove that I was just as smart and intelligent as white kids. And so it helped a little. It didn't totally erase it, but it was good to be able to do that. So we had to find ways to adapt to the situation in which we grew up in. And there were many times that were very trying, but as I said, the family stuck together. We knew about all the stereotypes, and we were constantly pointed out that something was different about us, that was not acceptable. Our hair, I had more people trying to figure out what my hair was, and I had people who would accidentally touch my skin, and they would wipe their hands because they weren't sure whether the color washed off or whatever, rubbed off, whatever it happened to be. And so we, and it was difficult for us because we started, buying into these stereotypes of what was acceptable, what was the standard of beauty, and all of that. So we had to straighten our hair, which was a horrible process. But, and I think our mother wanted us to be as accepted as much as possible. So we ended up doing a lot of work straightening our hair. And in those days, you had to straighten your hair with a hot comb. And actually, that's very good because now they're finding that, having these chemical straighteners really dangerous. They cause cancer and all kinds of. So we were lucky, at least it was a hot comb. But we had to do it. But so I talk about what that experience was like because one of the worst things about it was that your hair doesn't stay straight when it gets wet. So you don't like these tight curls that are natural. So you straighten them out. But so if you went swimming, you got a problem. And my mother used to be so upset that we would go swimming, but we wanted to learn how to swim. But she had just straightened our hair, which was a long process. So, or if you got caught in the rain, you're in trouble. So there's all those little things that were there that made us, again, feel very different than the other people in the community. So I talk about those kinds of things, the impact that everything had on my father, who, as I said, came north, but it was difficult for him. My mother, who had never been out of the South, and followed her husband up to this godforsaken community that she had no idea what it would be like, and she didn't understand. She had to grow her own food because there was no one heard the food that she was used to. Like, I don't know, now everybody knows a little bit more about collard greens, but in those days, collard greens were definitely not known in the North. It's a southern dish. And so she grew a lot of her vegetables because we were also poor and could not afford anything else. So, and she baked bread every single day. And there were things that set us apart, like she made biscuits for our lunch every day. Now it's a specialty, right? We were embarrassed because we had to go to school with our lunch, and the sandwiches were made with biscuits, and which set us apart. And which was just horrible for us. As I said, now it's not considered anything, negative, but for us it was. So everything, there were so many things that we had to figure out how to adapt or how to do what would make us feel somewhat like the other folks in town. So it was a difficult experience of growing up black, but as I said in the chapter that I read, it helped me figure out who I was and what my commitment would be. And so what I've done since then, I've done everything that would allow me to help, particularly poor people and people of color. I started out as a teacher and worked in a ghetto community. And what I decided to do was not only work with my students inside the classroom, but also find out more about what their lives were like. So I made visits to all their homes, met their parents, and worked with kids who were in trouble out in the community as a teacher. That's what I did. Then I became a social worker, which allowed me to, again, work with a poor population. And the thing I discovered very quickly was, especially if you're working in a community where there are poor blacks, is that the criminal justice system is always in your door. And so I did that for a while and wanted to know more about the criminal justice system in terms of how it works and how you change it. So I go back to school again. This becomes my third master's, to learn about the criminal justice system. And I found that to be an area that I could really sink my teeth in, because I saw what was happening with the disproportionate incarceration of people of color. And so I got my doctorate in criminal justice, and that's where I established the Center for Law and Justice, and have been working ever since on policy issues, and as well as helping people in an advocacy role who come in contact with the criminal justice system. So I continue that, and I'm constantly trying to educate people about the history of African Americans in this country, the impact of that history, and we do some work up in Essex, New York, every summer. We meet and we talk about various issues related to that. And I was really wanted to do it for another reason. I always wondered what people that I grew up with, how they really felt about me. But I didn't know because there was that wall that was there. I mean, some of them were nice. Don't get me wrong, but I never knew how they really thought about having this black family live in their community. So 2 years ago, I invited some of the ones that I was able to reach to come to Essex and to have a discussion about racism and white supremacy, and find out what they thought about me and my family. And they confirmed to a great extent that we were seen as outsiders. And so that's what this book is filled with stories about being an outsider, how I saw the world, how I tried to cope with it, and how I tried to change it as well. So anyway, that's what I was going to talk about. I was going to see if anybody had any questions. Yeah, it's, I live in Albany. So, most of my work is with the Center for Law and Justice. But we do have two things going. One is, I started an institute at retreat for writers of color. So that is operated out of Essex, New York. and we have writers who come up, new writers, writers looking to increase their skills at writing, and we've had some very established writers who help new writers fine-tune their craft. So what we do now is we allow writers to apply for residency, and they come, and some have done incredible writing. We've had plays done and performed. We have people writing all kinds of poetry, and sometimes a little history. We have a writer who's coming in August who will be there for the whole month. I've gotten a number of writers from New York City, Harlem in particular, and there was one named Youssef Salam. He came up. He was a writer in Harlem in the Amsterdam News, and he wanted to get an experience outside of Harlem to do some serious writing. He's a very good writer, by the way. He came up and he writes about his experience. He's, being in Harlem, he's used to so many things going on. And in Essex, the cottages up in the meadow, so quiet and peaceful, and designed to allow you to write. But he couldn't get used to it. So he wrote this story in, I think it was a quarterly magazine, and he coined the phrase, "I had to de-Harlemize myself." He had to figure out how to function without hearing all these sirens and noises and, all these things that are happening in Harlem. So we've had some really very good writers. I do that. I'm currently doing something with a group called HOLA, How Our Lives, I always forget what the acronym is, but How Our Lives Are Linked All Together. That's their title. They're mostly from Harlem. They've come up to the Adirondacks. They're interested in doing farming. They sort of want to go back to what they knew their ancestors did. So they were able to go to Africa and learn some stuff about harvest agriculture and harvesting and all of that. But they're more than that. They are a group of young people who are honoring other incarcerated people who went before them. So they're building this great organization to help other young people, and so we're trying to help them. They want to get some land up in the Adirondacks. So that's one of the things that we're working on. But right now, we're also doing a lot of work around reparations, trying to get people to understand, as I said, the impact of oppression on particularly African Americans, and what that means, how that has harmed African Americans throughout the ages. And now in New York State, they just passed legislation that would set up a reparations commission, and they will be doing their work starting in September, going to communities, talking to people about their lives and and trying to get research done as well to show the impact of that whole black people, and what should reparations look like, and it's not just a simple thing of money. There's so many different ways you can help people, help repair the damage that has been done to Africans in this country. So that's part of one of the things that we're doing at the center regarding reparations, and also looking for trying to promote zero youth detention, which means that we do not believe that young people should be incarcerated. they are not as developed and they can't make decisions, but to incarcerate them is to ruin their lives further. And so we're embarking on a major campaign because the county exec had named me chairperson of this task force to study that issue. And I did it for 3 years with a really great task force. And so we're waiting to see where it goes from here, because we've made a number of recommendations to the county so that they will stop incarcerating young people. But that's some of the stuff that we do. Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Green.
Okay.
And we would like everyone to know that we have Dr. Green's book, Outsider, in the Shirley McPherson bookstore here at the Lake George Historical Association. And it's also available online through our website.
Yes. Absolutely. Thanks for
Thank you so much,
Doctor. No. Yeah. Yeah, that would be one thing. You know, kids need to learn, and I think restorative justice can be a good way of teaching that. I mean, we're certainly concerned about public safety, but we don't believe you get public safety by putting kids in prison. They become adult prisoners as a result. So that's one of the things. We're also setting up a youth group where we can get kids together to start talking about some of these issues. Because not very few people listen to young people, and we want to make sure that we're hearing what they're saying. And so I have a group of really wonderful people from the community who are working with us to try to do that. And we're also talking about, of course, prevention is the best thing. If you can prevent someone from having to resort to certain kind of behavior, that's the best possible way of doing it. So people don't want to talk about prevention because unless you're committed to it, you're not going to like it. But we try to get them to understand that if people don't have housing, if they don't have employment, if they don't have a good school to go to, and all of those things, I don't know what you expect, you know. So we're still trying to get the community to see that as a top priority, because a lot of our kids now are living in situations where their families are homeless, and which turns out to be one of the biggest problems. So we're trying like mentoring as well with some of the solid young people and older people who are in the community who are willing to work with young people. So, but prevention for us is the key. And if we don't make a commitment to that, then we're still going to be going around in a circle, you know. And I try to show them, I make comparisons between certain communities. You know, what makes this community different than this other community? And usually the answer comes back: housing, you know, support for families, good schools. It comes back every time. So, and it's quite a job to get people to make a commitment to doing that. And so, but we haven't given up. And there's some good people that are working with us now. We have someone from the Black Child Development organization, and some other young people. We try to teach them how to be safe on the street. We do legal rights education, all those kinds of things. But we're only one organization. The commitment has to come from the people in our government to do the kinds of things that will, carry out a very strong program of prevention. Kids don't belong in prison. So, yeah, so.
Could we go back just to your talk a little bit about your having to leave that hotel at Adirondacks, you and your friend?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And when you got home, how did you get home?
Walk.
You did walk.
Oh yeah. we didn't have any choice.
Yeah.
Didn't have a phone. Didn't have any money. And we just walked and walked and walked.
And your mother, she must have been crushed.
She was. She didn't quite understand why I would quit. I mean, she had come from the South. She had dealt with all kinds of things, right? And probably the underlying education for her was that you stick to it. No matter what, you stick to it because you benefit at the end. But that was, for me, that was something that was not, that was more materialistic kind of things, which I don't know if she quite understood why I would do it. But she really, my mother was fantastic, don't get me wrong. She was an amazing woman. But she really wanted us to have the best that we could get. And for her, sticking it out, earning money for the summer, then I don't have to, do all kinds of things to try to get your clothing and all of that stuff. So she really was, on one hand, disappointed that I didn't stick to it. And after a while, she understood that for me, it was not, I couldn't do it. And that I was a different person. And I think she eventually accepted that. And she was a great mother. So, I mean, we made it through, but it would have been nice if I had been able to stay there. Because also my dad had an accident in the mine. One of those trolley cars ran over. And so he was not able to do the work that other iron ore miners were able to do underneath the earth. In order to make a decent salary, you had to work down in the mine. And so he could no longer do that. So they eventually got this job in the locker room, just helping, guys when they came to work to, get whatever they needed, that kind of stuff. So it was very difficult for her. And also living in North Country, I don't know if you know this or not, but one thing that's very popular in the North Country is drinking. Yeah. And especially if you work in a mine. It's a dangerous place to be. Really, a lot of people died in those mines. They got lung diseases. They got everything. It's very difficult. But, it's the kind of thing you had to do whatever you had to do. And so he could no longer do that. And, it put us even deeper, into poverty. And so I always, I have such a great appreciation for my mother, because she did everything that she could to make sure her children were safe. I mean, she was the first person to go to the school to make sure the teachers were, were handling us okay, that kind of thing. She attended basketball games and football games that she knew nothing about, but my brothers were playing. So she did everything that she possibly could. But she later understood that I had a commitment to deal with some of the issues and problems that I saw, and so I think I certainly was strengthened by doing what I did. I've never done anything for money. uh, uh, I've worked. I didn't do it just for money, and I still don't, because there's something much more important. And it's a long struggle. For African Americans, it's a long struggle. It's which started way back before 1865, and we're still struggling because of racism and discrimination and a whole bunch of things, and it's having a very negative impact and very harmful for many people. There have been some changes which are great, but we still are bearing the brunt of being dehumanized to a great extent. That whole experience, slavery, Jim Crow, extremely dehumanizing. And so if you don't think of somebody as an equal human being, it's kind of hard to talk about equity and justice when if you don't see me as an equal human being. I don't know how you talk about it. Right? And the other thing, it's been extremely taxing and problematic for people. It's sometimes hard for other people to understand the trauma that comes with all of this. And there is trauma connected with discrimination and racism. And I know some of that trauma, and you don't have to experience it directly, but you can experience it through other people or through history. I don't know if any of you heard of Emmett Till before. And I remember my mother wanted us to know about Emmett Till, who was killed in the South, and how they brutalized his body and what they did to him for no real reason. And so I've been traumatized all my life about that. It took me a long time before I would go south.
This is going to be a whole nother talk or a whole nother book, but maybe you could briefly explain how you climbed out of that poverty. How did you become as successful as you have?
How do you climb out of poverty?
How did you manage to escape that situation?
Well, as I said, it goes back really because, as I told you about my great grandmother and my father, they were illiterate. They couldn't read or write a word, but they understood from history. Blacks weren't allowed to read and write. It was against the law to teach somebody to read and write. So what do you expect? You expect them to, be equally equipped to do certain things? No, because you can't read and you can't write. And so they believe that education was really the way out of it. And I was taught that, and it was, my mother pushed it in my head that one of the ways of climbing out of poverty is to become educated. And she saw me, for her, it would have been great if her daughter could be a teacher. It was a respectable job, you earn money and you take care of yourself and all of that kind of stuff. And so she pushed me to do. That's why my first job was an educator. So that was what was taught to me. That's one way out of it. But then I learned also that it doesn't quite do it. That there are a lot of other things that are pressing in on you that make it very, very difficult. And I think the experience with tortoises taught me that you have to stand up for yourself and what you believe, and which I've always done. Sometimes it works for me, and sometimes it doesn't. But you will never walk away not knowing what I believe. And I do it. I've insulted the governor. I've done everything if I found that it was necessary in terms of trying to get across how important it was to respect people and what we need to do to make sure that everybody has access to the goods and services of this country, which they don't have now. So I've never, veered away from that. My grandmother was strong. She was incredible. She was my father's mother, the one who was a sharecropper. She could do anything. I mean, she was able to. She had nothing, but as a sharecropper, but she did things like sewing. She would take those sacks and stuff of wheat and things came in. She'd make clothing out of them. She was a scavenger. She would go to the store, I know in South Carolina, where they would throw away stuff that was either dented or not quite fresh. She'd find a use for it. She did gardening. She did washing and ironing for white people. She did everything, and she was a community leader. But she was able to escape after a while, pure poverty, because she had all these skills and she worked hard and she did else. So it was a good lesson for me. Yeah. So, okay. My pleasure. Mm-hmm. Oh, no. Absolutely. So I'm hoping. So, yeah. Well, thank you. Well, thanks for inviting me.